Welcome to the BeyondFear Podcast. I'm Jen and I've got a very special guest here today. We are planning on talking about placebo and nocebo. Neither of us are experts. A lot of the conversation is probably going to be about pain. So we're going to be talking quite a bit about that. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Harvey, over to you.
Hi. I'm Harvey Brown. So I'm a consultant psychiatrist, currently working in a liaison psychiatry service and also a psychological medicine service. Which basically involves seeing people in the general hospital with mental health problems and seeing people with cancer with mental health problems. And I guess my interest towards this way, I've also trained in a type of psychotherapy called CAT, or cognitive analytic therapy. So I'm interested in psychotherapy, and my real interest in working in mental health in the general hospital is what might be called medically unexplained symptoms. So people who are in the hospital and they have symptoms, but when the doctors do all the scans, they can't find anything, and the people are still having the symptoms. And this is the kind of stuff that I work with quite a lot, and this is what I like working with, essentially.
I was going to say, so it's like the X-Files.
Yeah, it does feel a bit like that, and I guess it's I really like the there's just pure shades of grey. Like there's no clear answers, there's no aha moments. Right. It's all just kind of conversation, untangling things, sort of trying to reconnect bits and figuratively. Yeah.
So it's quite like pain in a way. So in a couple of days ago, I've launched just a little pain course, like teaching clinicians about pain and pain science. And I know we've discussed in the past about Lorimer Mosley. Shout out to Lorimer if you're watching. And so kind of what you're sort of saying about like having the scans, nothing wrong, but still feeling that sort of pain. And obviously that we were always taught that pain is like signals. So you damage your arm, the pain signal goes up to your brain. But obviously like recent science has sort of more modern science has changed that thought process, in that they came up with the gate control theory, where certain messages would get sent through and sometimes they'd get dulled down. And then obviously it's sort of changed again, where it's nociception, the signals of potential damage and threats get sent to the brain weighs everything up and then determines whether to produce that pain experience or not. So that's it in a nutshell. And so obviously like placebo, nocebo, that kind of can impact on that, because the brain is there to determine what chemicals to release and everything. But it also explains that unexplained sort of side of it doesn't explain it, of, why tissues hurt potentially more, even though the damage, the sensation of pain is worse, even though the damage has healed. So I believe you have a particular experience or story that.
Yeah, so I mean, just something that someone I've been working with recently. Obviously, I keep it very vague.
Anonymous.
But it's just someone who has an experience of chronic pain and functional neurological disorder, which basically means they've got neurological symptoms like weakness or sensory loss or something like that, and it's not in a pattern. Basically, in neurology, if something goes wrong, it always goes wrong in a set pattern, because it can only follow how the nerve anatomy works. So if you damage this nerve here, the pattern of where the sensory loss is will be exactly the same in every person. Yeah. So for a neurologist, and I'm not a neurologist, but for a neurologist, for them it's sometimes quite straightforward initially to say, right, this does not fit the distribution of nerve anatomy, so it's likely to be functional. So he has that diagnosis, and I think a lot of people have a really hard time accepting that diagnosis, because it's so like wishy-washy, or it feels very wishy-washy because it's not something that's easily kind of explainable to a patient. Sometimes they actually just really they feel very motivated to find something wrong, because it's like, then I'll have an answer, then we can think of a solution that I can understand, rather than this very complicated, wishy-washy, functional neuro stuff, which I think is not as wishy-washy as it seems. I think we're just getting better at explaining it, and maybe it's not that well understood generally in a general hospital how to deal with it. So people, So anyway, this person, he has a hard time accepting this diagnosis, and for him, what does not make sense to him is when he had the injury, which was quite a significant, nasty injury, he did not experience much pain. And now, sort of a few years later, he has basically severe pain in his leg in the same place as where he had the injury, which is now healed. And so for him, he struggles to make sense of that. And it's like what I was saying before, that's like that sort of like common folk understanding of how pain works, is that it's just a direct signal of damage to your body that goes to your brain, and it's telling you that your body's damaged. And that's how most people understand what pain is. But actually, as you're just saying, we now know that isn't how it works. Yeah. So, and I guess this fits into how maybe we can, how explaining how the nervous system works and how pain works could actually help. Yeah. I guess linked to this kind of placebo nocebo kind of responses. This could actually help. Just teaching them how pain works could actually help with their symptoms.
Okay, I'm just going to adjust my microphone because it keeps falling down. I keep putting it back up and it keeps coming back down. Can't tighten anything, so we're just going to hope and pray it sort of stays up. So kind of like from I'll kind of break this down a little bit for hopefully for the listeners if they've so quite often it kind of reminds me about like phantom limb pain. So you can lose a limb, have a limb amputated, and then it it still hurts, and it's sort of like why that happens. So without going too much into the sort of science side, so you've got like the neuroplasticity, so your brain, kind of different areas of the brain will process different sort of sensations and that sensory information. When a limb is removed, because the brain is plastic, it starts processing other information over there. So my general understanding, I read a book. That's about I read a book and done a bit at uni. So there was an experiment where they severed the median nerve in a chimp, and the area they tested the brain and found the area that processed that median nerve information. Once that nerve was severed, I believe it was the ulnar and the radial nerve began to use, it's like real estate on the brain, so they start using that area of the brain instead. Right. Things like if they've lost their hand, touching their face can often create the sensation of the hand. So it's all weird and voodoo. Wow. That's a technical term, voodoo. So you've kind of got that. You've also got like with the pain experience. So obviously you've had the damage. You have what they call sensitization. So the sensitization, peripheral sensitization and central sensitization. And the peripheral happens in like the limb. So you damage your arm and the nerves there send the nociceptive signal. So that's basically special nerves that send signal of damage. They send that up towards the brain or to the spinal cord. When they have been damaged significantly, especially if they've been sort of active for a long time, they can become a lot more sensitive. So any sort of pressure, any any sort of impact on them basically can sort of magnify that signal. So it's almost like an alarm. That's one of the ones that often get used is like it's having a house alarm and you've had a burglary, so it becomes highly sensitive, and like the cat and the dog keep setting it off all the time. So that happens, but you've also then got the messages. So the messages go from there to the spinal cord, and then where it enters the spinal cord at the dorsal horn. I say dorsey horn. It's because I was doing dorsiflexion yesterday. Dorsal horn. The sensitization happens there. The brain can become more sensitive to it as well. Then that can the brain can send signals that then magnify it as well. And then you've also got interneurons. Oh, it's all the science, which also magnify that. So what they find, what Lorimer Moseley has found, what a lot of the current science is that the more we educate people and let them know what it is that they're experiencing from an injury point of view, like you said about a diagnosis. So people often want that diagnosis. They want that sort of label. Like quite often people get MRIs and it's, oh, I need an MRI. It's like, well, why do you need the MRI? Well, I need to know what's wrong. It's like, well, are you going to have surgery? No. Why do you need to know what's wrong then? Like, why don't we just crack on with the plan instead of waiting months for a scan? That having that, okay, this is what's wrong with you, matters so much in that healing process. So, I mean, like, from your experience, have you found that diagnosis changes people's perceptions on what's going wrong or what's going wrong with them?
Yeah, so I mean, and I think there's a lot of crossover with chronic pain, but I haven't worked much with chronic pain, but I would like to, so I probably plan to. But in the sort of functional neurological disorder stuff, basically a single conversation about how, and it has to be it can't be often what happens in a general hospital is everyone's so busy and people get given a diagnosis at like 9 o'clock in the morning on a busy ward round, and then it's moved on to the next patient. In my role, we get a bit of a luxury to take our time over things, basically. So I might see like 2 patients a day or something.
Right.
And which is a real luxury, but without that luxury, you just wouldn't be able to do kind of a good work with these things. No. So basically you really have to, you might sit down and explain the diagnosis to someone for an hour or something like that. So it's not just giving a diagnosis, it has to be really kind of explained. And even that one conversation can make a significant improvement to someone's symptoms. So, so had people who, you see them and have this conversation and then they come back, previously they might have been in a wheelchair in the hospital, and then, they literally walk into the next appointment. The recovery can be uncertain, but sometimes the initial, just in reconnecting, basically them acknowledging the role of stress and their nervous system on what's going on in their body, just making that link together can actually just treat them, basically.
Biopsychosocial model.
Yeah.
So being at uni, that's one of the first things we sort of learned about was that model. Because I think like when I started, I was thinking, I just want to learn what rehab exercises work. Somebody's in pain, I want to help and know what exercises, how to prescribe it and get them. And then, I started learning. I really started learning then. And it's like, it's not just, I think we've kind of got so used to thinking that our bodies are machines and that there's some sort of like mechanical organism, and we don't realize how much that I think psychosocial, I'm never much of a fan of the social side, because to me it's like all the social sort of stuff is all psychological, really. Like I always feel like that one's just kind of, it's important, but it's just like but it's the other two, that bit's just like an add-on. Yeah. Maybe that's just me being ignorant. But yeah, so like the brain has so much power, and obviously the nervous system, because, like sometimes, like, I mean, we've discussed on the way here, I'm stressed. But as you know, educating wise, I know why I'm stressed. I know what's messing up. I know a lot of it's my nervous system, and you know, I also know there's actually not a whole lot I can do about it, but I know it will pass.
Yeah.
So so from if I didn't have that education and understanding, I'd probably be an absolute mess right now.
And also, and I think what's the fact that you're instinctively knowing that your stress response is being triggered and why, is really important. So I think the pattern I've noticed in some of the people I see who develop, they're nervous, they may have been through some kind of trauma early in their life, and their nervous system has adapted in some way.
Right.
Basically, it's. I think children are obviously so adaptable, and if you think sort of evolutionarily, we have to be able to keep on functioning. Previously that would have just meant dying, essentially. If you're a foraging human and you go through a trauma, something terrible happens, and you go into shock. If you don't come out of it the next day and find a way to carry on functioning, you just die. So because you won't find food. So I think our brains still have this mechanism. So particularly children, they can experience horrific trauma and they find a way to carry on functioning and be children and go to school and carry on their role in life. But their nervous system has to adapt in some way. And it seems to be that there's something about that adaptation creates this slight disconnect between the nervous system and the conscious kind of mind. And so maybe if we use your example, someone who has been through a significant trauma, they struggle to put these things together a little bit, and it's almost like this stress in their nervous system builds up like completely outside of their awareness.
Yeah.
And until, it builds up and builds up and then they wake up one day and they literally can't walk or something, because it's just all of this pressure has been building up in the nervous system and their brain has learnt to shut off, as an adaptive mechanism.
Yeah.
And so it just builds and builds until, something kind of falls apart.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I suppose it's like where it's like we're not talking about placebos and nocebos.
I know, yeah.
Like breakdowns happen. It's like it's always that you're shelving things and like suppressing emotions. It's just like no, I've got to crack on, get through the day, and you're constantly doing that, and it just gets to a point where enough's enough, and everything's just like gone.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's a really useful strategy. But if it's the only strategy, then it can cause problems. Yeah. We'll move on.
Placebo and nocebo. So if you don't know what placebo and nocebo is, I do have, courtesy of ChatGPT, a definition. So a placebo is a positive effect driven by expectation, context, and belief. A negative is basically a nocebo, negative effect by fear, expectation, or suggestion. So a lot of this does actually link in again to pain, because two of the main sort of things that pain science sort of, or it's probably not pain science, it's just pain, that are sort of linked psychologically are fear avoidance and catastrophising. So I'm guessing you're familiar with those in your line of work.
Yeah.
So catastrophising, fear, expectation, or suggestion. If you expect something's going to hurt, it probably will. Although I do have an argument with that, which was so I had to have all my health injections here at the uni, and when they were doing hepatitis something or other, the lady was right. I'm going to warn you, this one's going to hurt. It's going to really hurt. It's an awful one. It's going to hurt and it's going to burn and it's going to be really sore for a few days. And I'm like, oh God. And, and it seems to take like, instead of 30 seconds to take, it seems to take I swear I was sat there for like 5 minutes waiting for this injection. And I was just like, right, just deep breaths, remember those four childbirths of deep breaths and just concentrate. Didn't blimmin' hurt. Didn't hurt. There was no burning. It was fine. And it was just like, why have you made me so nervous? So so that was a nocebo. It didn't work. She tried to nocebo me. She failed. But yeah, so placebo. So a lot of therapies are placebo. Well, that sounds awful. Yeah, come for your massage. A lot of therapies are sort of the kind of placebo-y in that they provide that expectation. Someone comes in for a treatment or a therapy or even like physio or whatever, and they expect to have a good, normally, hopefully, maybe 10 minutes in the NHS. They might be thinking otherwise, but there's that expectation that they're going to be treated. They're coming into a clinical environment. They're seeing all the awards on the wall. And, they've got the person in the lab coat or whatever, the NHS uniform. And it's like that, right, okay, cool. Someone's finally here to listen to me. And having that good therapeutic response and that alliance and listening to that person, genuinely listening, motivational interviewing and active listening and all of that. So by having that, actually, that is a treatment in its own. It's almost like counselling in a way. They're effectively getting that treatment in that response. So the nervous system immediately, hopefully, begins to settle from that anyway. So I suppose nocebo, on the other hand, like if somebody's got a fear about going in, so, they're going to see yourself or whatever, and they're actually really nervous about that. I suppose the problem's getting them in there in the first place. But then do you sort of find that like you have do you do that to people? Do you scare them?
Well, people don't tend to be that happy to see me. It has to be said. And I guess interestingly, I think it's particularly the people who struggle with these type of problems because maybe there's something psychologically about that, maybe something in their background as well. They feel like somebody is going to dismiss them and tell them it's all in their head or something like that, and they feel like that's what me coming to see them represents, basically. Yeah. So then I have to sort of work really hard to sort of try and undo that that expectation. Yeah. Hopefully turn it from a nocebo into a placebo.
Yeah. So when you see patients and they're not particularly receptive at coming to see you, do you sort of sense that, or is there a way that you sort of work that out? What do you do to break down those barriers?
Yeah, well, I guess I think you have to just try your best, really, and I think you have to know that the person has to be ready to take on this kind of thing, because if they aren't ready for it, then it's not going to be helpful to them, and if they might be too early in their journey, they might be still under investigation or something like that. They might be awaiting a scan and kind of holding on to that and thinking, right, this is the thing that's going to. But I think that's why I see people in hospital and then I follow them up in clinic, and that's really important, because if someone's in hospital, they haven't come and chosen, they haven't like travelled to this appointment specifically to see me to talk about this stuff. They're just there, and I've come to see them. So the whole dynamic shifts. If they actually make it to clinic and they've chosen to come, then that's a massive deal, basically. That's a really like great start. So I think sometimes I think my advice is often, find a way for people to get people out of hospital, really, because hospital environments,
you're trapped.
They're not ideal for anyone.
Yeah.
But sometimes people, they want to stay in hospital because they think if the right doctor or the right scan happens, they will have their answer and that will make things better. But but if we don't think that's going to happen, then we have to say, actually, just get them out of hospital. Get them out of hospital safely. This thing is not going to get better in hospital. It might actually get worse because the environment is so triggering to the nervous system, so overwhelming.
Yeah.
They need to get back in their own home.
But then they feel dismissed.
But then they can feel dismissed. So yeah, it's a really it's a real balance, and people I think have to go on a bit of a journey. I mean, it depends. Sometimes I see people who I've seen someone who when they developed their functional neurological disorder, it was very dramatic. Like they suddenly couldn't walk,
right?
And they're quite young, and so they went straight into hospital, had all MRIs, everything, and then they were diagnosed by a neurologist the next day as having this, and so I think that's a much more likely to something that they can work with. Whereas sometimes if it's more insidious, people have had like more subtle symptoms. They've been trying to work out what it is for a long time. They keep feeling like they're getting fobbed off.
Yeah.
And the symptoms, if we think about, in the nervous system, those symptoms have had longer to sort of like bed themselves in.
Yeah.
I guess, maybe a pathway towards these symptoms developing becomes more like established or something like that.
It's like the brain operates as predictions based on expectations, based on previous experiences. And it's always adapting. So the brain, the body adapts.
Yeah.
So if we are constantly adapting, not necessarily for the benefit, and that's what sort of pain's all about, is that the body becomes better at producing those signals.
I guess the more something happens, the more your brain will expect it. And that makes sense.
And then if we're moving, even like compensating movement, so you damage your shoulder rolls in, you can end up using like fear avoidance and never actually retraining because you just adapt. Oh, I'm not going to use that arm. I'll use this other one. And before you know it, you haven't used that arm in forever. And you're struggling to then reactivate those messaging, or there's that hesitancy of, I don't want to move it that way because it hurts. And it's like, well, have you actually tried doing that for a while? And sometimes it can hurt because the body's adapted and just got so good at replaying those messages and increasing the alarm. So with your sort of line of work and diagnosis, like your X-Files, I quite like this, the X-Files. So what sort of typically, what do you find with that? Like, do they present with like sort of physical problems, or is it sort of more psychological problems? Is it a mixture of both? It's
normally a purely physical problem, and I guess that's part of the issue. Right. Is that it may be driven by the nervous system, but because those parts aren't quite connected, it's coming out as a purely physical issue, and that's why the patient thinks it's a physical issue purely, and that's why the doctors often initially think that. So yes, I think I was saying to you before, wasn't I, about there's so much uncertainty in these diagnoses that you have to really put aside any expectations, because essentially I'll go and see these people and say, I don't know that you have functional neurological disorder. It's just my best estimation based on the fact that you've had all these scans and you've seen a neurologist. They think that's what's going on. And so I don't actually make the diagnosis. I don't tell people. I sort of say, well, you've been diagnosed with this. It tends to be the team neurologist who diagnoses functional neurological disorder, or a gastroenterologist who diagnoses like a functional gastric disorder, which is another thing I see quite a lot of. And then I come in and say, well, I hear you've been diagnosed with this. Right. Let's see what we can do. And I sort of try and keep it open-ended. We don't know that you've got this, but it's quite possible. And my explanation will sometimes be like, well, these disorders are actually really, really common. So I think in neurology, the figure that's widely quoted is that 30% of all neurological problems are functional. Right. So it's ridiculously common, really. And so statistically, it's just more likely to be that than and this is where I'm interested in this other stuff. This like our brains don't really understand statistics very well intuitively. So if you look at like a differential diagnosis for something where say you know a list of causes for a problem, our brain will instinctively treat the probabilities as equal.
Okay.
It's all in this book called Thinking Fast and Slow, which I've read the first chapter of and it's amazing, but then I've never been beyond the first chapter because it's
a heavy read.
It's very illuminating but very heavy.
Okay.
So people say they have read it. I don't know if I believe them.
I'm gonna.
I think it's something that it's a gold mine of really interesting stuff. Their example is like you see. It's an American kind of example, but you show someone a picture of someone who's dressed in kind of a smartish shirt, sort of brown cords and some glasses, and you say, is this a librarian or a farmer? And everyone says, oh, they're a librarian. But then there's something like 1,000 farmers to every librarian in America or something like that.
Right.
So if you were making an accurate like probability guess, it's 1,000 times more likely to be a farmer.
Right, okay.
But your brain just doesn't like that. It doesn't seem to put statistics together in that way. So I think it's a bit of a roundabout way of saying it, but so sometimes in these people there's a drive by the patient that they want to find a definitive answer, and in response to that the doctors work really hard to rule out these really obscure causes. And now and again it does turn out to be this really obscure cause that might be like a 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 thing. But statistically, it's always going to be more likely to be functional by many, many times.
Yeah.
And so that's something that, I try and help people understand that, well, these things are actually just so common that it's just more likely to be this.
I think it's hard because it's when it's you and it's in, you know, your head and your experience, you know, you can't escape that. And see, if it was me and like, you know, I had a particular disorder, pretend that I don't. And so if that was the case, and it's like, okay, these are the most common ones, and you sort of think, okay, it's probably one of these because, you know, I can't be that special, right? But then you do look at the really small, like 0.5% chance of this, and you start sort of thinking, knowing me, I'd be that. I'd be that 0.5%. And I think it's like one of those, like, it has to be someone. But it's funny, again, it's like the positive and negative. So I think that was that sort of case. And I had, you know, I was trying to come up with, somebody was giving me a diagnosis and it was like that 1% obscure something or other. I'd probably be focused on, if it was a negative thing, let's just say, you know, it's not like superpowers or something. I'd probably be focused on that, oh my God, it's going to be this really obscure, awful thing. That there's a really, really remote chance that it's just going to be typical, that it'd be me that's going to happen. Whereas winning the lottery, that's not going to happen to me. You know, the obscure chance of winning the lottery, that won't be me. But of something terrible, but then that's placebo, nocebo. So there was a statistic when I was doing my research, but I don't remember what it is nocebos are something like 2-3 times as powerful as placebos, because from a negative point of view, if somebody is expecting a negative thing, it'll be. But then even just shopping, so, you know, if you have a bad experience in a shop, if you've got a good experience in a shop, you go out, oh, that was nice. If you have a bad experience in a shop, rant on Google reviews, and, you know, and you're literally telling everyone for weeks, don't go there.
Yeah, and I guess that, I mean, the risk of opening up a can of worms, you know, obviously, you know, that's how things like Twitter and things have gone very south, because they found that the negative emotions being triggered makes people more motivated to engage, and so everything becomes very biased towards like harmful, hateful content. But anyway, that's probably a different podcast.
No, but it's true, isn't it? It's like negative experiences seem to like outweigh. So I was thinking something else, but I've lost my train of thought now. But so like we are, but then I remember what it was. Like sports performance, you know, if you, that was in my homework as well, was about sports performance. Like if you gave somebody a placebo and you sort of said, oh, this is performance enhancing or legal performance enhancing, this sugar pill, and they take it, they probably will get a placebo effect, and it will be, you know, provided it's from a trustworthy source. So if it was like a coach or someone that they trusted, if it was Daniel in the back alley going, hey, try these, probably not so much. But yeah, they'd get that placebo effect, small. If they were given something that, you know, oh, this is going to negatively affect your performance, it would be magnified, and it'd be that sort of bigger expectation. But then I think it's because the brain is wired for survival. It wants to survive. Yeah. You know, it wants to go foraging the next day.
Exactly.
It's not bothered about foraging well.
Yeah.
So it's like performance doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's like, are we going to survive today? Cool. Yeah. So possibly the negative experiences end up heightened because, you know, we want to survive, you know, and that's
absolutely.
The brain's
I think
response.
that feels really important. I wanted to talk a little bit about this, the couple of nocebo examples.
Oh, okay, go on.
So there's a small one that I don't know a lot about, but I think when I was reading about nocebo, the one that came up was statin medications.
Yeah.
And how the study came out about these quite rare effects of statins, how they cause like some muscle damage. Okay. And that can lead to kidney problems and stuff like that. And I think in the wake of that, and the wake of that being in the news, a lot of people started having these symptoms and came off their statins, when I don't think it was proven that was actually going on. And then the rate of heart attacks and strokes actually went up. Yeah. Because the nocebo effect had convinced people to stop taking the medication. Yeah. The other thing I was going to say at the start is one thing that's interesting, I think, in the terminology of nocebo and placebo effect, as I read something about how it would be more accurate to describe it as placebo and nocebo response. Okay. Because it's actually something in the recipient that is creating the effect, rather than, you know, the idea is that you know, it's something totally inert that you're getting. Yeah. So it's kind of more of a response than an effect, if that makes sense. Well, that's just it. Is like I think when we hear placebo, we sort of think, you know, it's a sugar pill to trick the brain, or you know, like trick. Yes, I think brain and mind are kind of two different things as well in a way. Like, yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, like people think that it's like, you know, when somebody's learning something new, like if somebody's learning to swim and they're trying to swim, and and like, especially like my son learning anything, he's 8. I'll let him off. He gets so sort of, I want to say angry. Angry's not. He's arsey. He's arsey. It's the only word that describes it. He's arsey because he knows what to do, and it's like the mind knows what to do, but obviously you've got to connect that neuro connection and everything else, and create the muscle. You know, you need those messaging pathways. Yeah, people don't always kind of get that. And now I don't even remember why I started on it. I'm on this path. But yeah, it's just that, I've absolutely lost train of thought. So over to you, Harvey. It's those exact messaging pathways that get disrupted in, like they get badly disrupted in functional neurological disorders. It's probably something that we all experience. Like, you know, if I'm doing PT and I'm trying to do an exercise that I haven't done for a while, and it feels like insanely hard, and then the next set starts to feel a bit easier again. It's like you've taught me about this. You know, the pathways are kind of warming up. Like, it's that kind of process that's going wrong in quite a, you know, severe way in functional, like, neurological disorder. Well, I mean, I won't talk details, but I have a friend who they've had a diagnosis of POTS. Okay. And it's now gone very sort of neurological. So is that postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome? Okay. So and but like they were running and everything, and it was just like heart rate issues and, you know, lying down, getting up and things like that. Whereas now they're being investigated for neurological stuff. So I think they've just had an MRI. I do need to check in. And
the worry is that it's like MS or something related to that. But I've done PT sessions, and like you can see visually like that it's challenging, like the movements, you know, they'd have been fine with a year or two back, but they're trying to do these movements and they're really challenging. And then, but round 2, they're improving.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be, you know, not placebo, but, you know, I'm trying to do that sort of positive response of being, you know, look, things are progressing and stuff. But as well, the waiting lists are so long for everything. And it's just like, you're just constantly seeing sort of those challenges and like the lack of support from clinical experts. And like, I mean, they've rushed through this sort of MRI now. But I don't think she was due to see anyone really till the end of this year. So it's sort of like, March?
So this is where I think, especially with something like chronic pain, is people's relationship with the pain and their relationship with the services looking after them can sort of mirror their like maybe early experience of negative relationships. So I think people who have been kind of dismissed or victimized in some way in their life may be more likely to feel very powerless in the wake of pain. And feel like it's not going to get better, and also maybe feel like the services are not, you know, and they are, you know, they obviously are, but that they might take that in a very personal way rather than a more systemic, you know,
everything's strained.
All the, you know, all services are just, you know, on their knees kind of thing. It's kind of more like, well, just no one listens to me, and then that potentially, and this is something that I want to understand more, is, you know, and I guess through like nocebo expectation, that actually makes the pain worse, because
it's like the opposite of being listened to. If you've been listened to, you feel better, so you walk out feeling a lot more positive, you know, and that's going to immediately change your posture. You know, so in the placebo information, I can't remember where it is. I did mention it. We have the DLPFC, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Did know that off the top of my head, wasn't looking at paper. So that's part of your brain which forms expectations, evaluates meaning, safe versus dangerous, and drives top-down control of pain. So one of the placebo things I was looking at, was it placebo? It was placebo. There was 2. So there was one where it was I'm sure that one was to do with pain, and when there was that expectation, it basically released the body's own opioids, so people got pain relief from the placebo. But it's like, we sort of say about like tricking the brain, and that our minds are easily, you know, or we're easily tricked. It's not, the brain expects it, so the brain then releases chemicals, so it is an actual physiological process.
Absolutely,
it's 100% real. You know, it's a real trick. It's like real magic. And the other one was it was a condition you might know. It's related to dopamine. Is it Parkinson's?
Parkinson's is dopamine related.
And they were testing out a medication. I haven't read the actual study. This was just reading an overview, but they were testing out this medication, and the placebo, there was a placebo group and the other group, and I can't remember now. But anyway, basically, when they did the testing, when people took the placebo, they released, although they've got a dopamine shortage, they released like 200% dopamine or something. It was something stupid. Again, I don't have the study. Apparently, Google says now. Like the overview was. So, you know, it is a physiological. Your brain expects something to happen, and because it's a prediction, so you'll probably know more about this. It's like your brain always predicts and processes everything before it happens.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, your brain. This is where it comes back to the, you know, our intuitive, like, folk understanding of how our body works just is not really ever how it actually works. Like, our brains are just like essentially like a sealed off box in a cube. Like, our brain doesn't see like what's outside. It doesn't hear. it just gets nerve information, and so it's just like feeding code into a computer, and your brain is basically, my best guess, is that this is a table, based on all this experience, how it feels, how it looks. It doesn't actually know there's a table. It doesn't see it. It's just literally a sealed off.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and it is. Yeah, you can go down some deep rabbit holes as to, in that case, what actually is reality, and how do we know it's actually real?
God, we need to rename this podcast. Yeah. It's like we'd be like Mulder and Scully. Yeah. Well, there's a book I'm reading. Don't even know what the book's called. It's like, brain's absolutely had it. But
Dissociation.
Yeah. And in that, it's the brain that rewrites itself.
Okay.
Anyway, it's really good. I'm really enjoying it. It's all on neuroplasticity. And so in that, it's very much about case studies. And they were going over one guy's work, and I did know the name, and now I've forgotten the name, but it was like in the 60s, and he created for patients that were blind, he created a chair that would vibrate and provide the images through vibrations through the back. Then it ended up vibrations on the tongue. So you'd have this device, you put it in your mouth, it'd vibrate the images onto the tongue, and it took learning, but the brain learnt to see through that.
Wow, amazing.
So I remember the book said that people could see Twiggy because obviously like it was the 60s.
Yeah.
They'd project the image of Twiggy into vibrations onto the tongue. So that information, the brain taught itself to see that information, see that picture. But obviously it's not very sexy to roll out into the NHS. It's like, it takes about a year or two to learn how to see it in this way. And, so it did lead on to other things. I think it led on to like some of the corneal, retinal, implanty stuff. So I think it had the research did lead on to other things. It's very much, he sort of said like he can wire up any sort of sense into the, like he can cross wire anyway.
That's
really
so
interesting book.
It's
just taking me a while because it's I don't think it's heavy, but it's a little bit heavier.
Sometimes I feel like when a book's got too much, when you it's like you're learning too much, it's kind of overwhelming, and you have to like, I can't learn this, I can't take in all this at once. It's too much.
Yeah. And like I constantly at the minute, especially because stress levels are that high, a bit higher, you read a paragraph and you're like, no. You're like reading it 3-4 times. It's like, I've probably, the amount of time I've spent reading that book, I should have probably finished it already about twice. It just takes that longer,
and
doesn't it?
That is your stress response impacting the way your conscious experience is created. But
education helps.
So
I'm well aware.
I wanted to advocate that this my sort of brain anatomy is not good, but this
me neither.
What is it? The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex?
DLPFC. Dorsolateral.
Dorsolateral.
So DLPFC. So it's going to be on the side somewhere.
So I'm pretty sure that this is part of the brain that is also part of what's been termed the default mode network. I don't know if you've heard this term. It's basically like if you scan someone and get them to just think about nothing.
Okay.
Like that's what's going on in the brain. So just a general awareness, of where, what's going on in your body, where it is. Just a sort of general consciousness seems to be this default mode network or whatever. And I'm pretty sure this dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is like part of that. And I think what they found in the famous book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is an amazing book about
I'll add that one on my list.
Trauma and dissociation and things like that. But I think one of the things that he talks about, this Dutch guy, Bessel van der Kolk, in brain scans, they found that people with PTSD, so people who had been through a severe trauma, like we talked about how earlier, the nervous system was adapted maybe to because their experience of their nervous system, how unpleasant your nervous system being triggered is. Fear response. You know, I get it. You know, when your kid falls over or something like that. You know, it's so unpleasant. It's so unpleasant. You know, that sort of sinking feeling in your stomach.
You get like the ringing in your ears often, like when something and that. See, this is bad that I know all this. Ringing in the ears, you're almost like spinning and going lightheaded, and you feel like your heart literally stop and sick, and like something's just kind of like punched you in the stomach.
Yeah.
I know that.
And it's so unpleasant that it's that's where the adaptive response comes in. It's like, well, I'm not going to be able to go around and live my life and go and get food if I'm having these awful
moments,
symptoms. You know, I just want to curl up into a ball and just pretend everything go away. So when they scanned these people who've been through trauma, who potentially have adapted their nervous systems in this way, they found some kind of disruption in the default mode network. So there was almost like a cutting off of their conscious experience in some way, so that it was more kind of able. So they were better able to function. They had to actually cut themselves off from their in some way.
Because it's needed for survival.
Yeah. But they obviously, the downside of that is that they tend to feel disconnected from their experience and obviously, and a lot of the symptoms of PTSD that kind of go along with that.
What's, can say sort of like cutting it off, it can be repaired?
Yeah, so I think this is what we're trying to, I mean, so I suppose they're definitely related, the idea of PTSD and the functional stuff. I think they definitely can be repaired, and I suppose that's what we're trying to do with the functional neurology stuff. We're trying to put those things back together. I think it can be really challenging to, in kind of severe, you know, if we're thinking about like combat veterans or something like that, their experiences can be so distressing when it comes back that they're so hard to tolerate. And this is where the ideas come in for using like psychedelic medicines and things like that, because if you give someone like a good whack of MDMA, the pathway that was connecting, you know, the brain to the overwhelming stress response when thinking about that memory is kind of really, really dampened.
Yeah.
So they can actually tolerate, because I think that's one of the big barriers in PTSD. You've got this idea of a tolerance, where a window of tolerance where you can actually talk about something, and either your nervous system goes too high into fight flight, and you know your brain basically switches off, and you just turn into a running fighting machine, or you dissociate, which is kind of the other end of the spectrum, where you go into this almost like a play dead type response. So people can, So that's one of the challenges in treating PTSD, is that you want to try and reconnect these things, and you want to make the deeper levels of the brain understand that they are safe now. Yeah. They weren't at one point, but they now are. But to actually, for people to tolerate that without having this overwhelming is really, really challenging. And
so it's almost like using psychedelic drugs as almost like a crutch to help somebody on that rehabilitation journey.
Yeah. And so I think that is something that we'll see more of.
It was always sort of done like for years of, you know, it's going to make things worse, and you know and obviously I'm not recommending, you know, but do as your doctor says, not as but sometimes we need that sort of like extra help to, because I think that's just it. It's especially if the system's like overwhelmed. Is how do you lower that overwhelm? Because if you're just going to add more to it, like with, you know, we're going to add these, I don't know, exercises or diaries or, you know, whatever sort of interventions, you're just adding more to an overwhelmed system. So it's like, well, what can we reduce? How can we make this easier? You said earlier before about you had sort of a couple of nocebo sort of things.
Oh yeah, I was going to talk about.
See, I remembered that. I remembered your stuff. I don't remember my own.
I was going to mention Havana syndrome. And again, this is where it's fascinating. This is where the uncertainty comes in. Like, I don't know that Havana syndrome is a psychosomatic illness or psychogenic or whatever term you want to use.
Go on, tell us what Havana syndrome is.
So essentially, it's a set of symptoms that were reported by kind of CIA agents when they were in the Cold War. When they were, I can't remember exactly when it started, but at the height of paranoia and things like this, obviously Cuba with its kind of communist leanings, there's kind of rich ground for paranoia there. So people who play CIA agents who were in Cuba, they started reporting these set of symptoms that were things like tinnitus and headaches and fatigue and things like this. And somebody, came up with the idea that this might be because of this kind of that they were being attacked with some kind of weapon,
right?
Some kind of invisible weapon, and someone came up with this idea that it was like a sound weapon or a microwave weapon that had been developed by Russia or whatever that was harming the people. And there's been a lot of documented cases of it, and I think even might be wrong with this, but I think even Kamala Harris.
Heard of her?
Yeah, I think she reported having symptoms when she basically there's an Irish neurologist called Suzanne O'Sullivan who's written like books about this stuff, and she talks about this about how it's like they created like the ideal breeding ground for a psychogenic illness, basically. So for it to sort of carry on, what happened when people were posted in Cuba, they told them, by the way, there's this kind of new super weapon that they might be using to attack you. These are the kind of symptoms people have been experiencing, tinnitus, headaches, fatigue. And then I guess this is where I think the critical bit with placebo and nocebo, the expectation shifts your awareness. So
you start looking for
you start focusing on something in your body that you normally don't. And therefore it feels new because you're not used to, you don't normally focus on it. So if you listen hard enough or something, you can probably hear some ringing in your ears, for example.
I'm trying to listen now.
Or if another, I think a really easy example is like if you were worried about, like walking upstairs is really hard, but you're literally like pushing your entire body weight basically vertically. And if you're worried about something, whether you're ill or something like that, you get to the top of the stairs and you're like, oh my God, so breathless. And I think that most of the time when that's happening, that's a nocebo, because other times you're walking up the stairs and your body is getting really tired because stairs are really hard. But your expectation of something bad is not there. So you just don't even think about it. Your awareness is not drawn to it. So basically with these people, they were told what to look out for. The symptoms were very kind of vague. Non-specific type symptoms that, maybe that we all get from time to time for different reasons, like headaches, fatigue, feeling your heart thumping in your chest. And they're also stress response symptoms, right? So they create this kind of like incubating chamber of fear.
There's this random thing that's going to happen or could be happening, this weapon, secret weapon, mysterious invisible weapon. That causes all these general stress signals.
And then
you're all stressed now. Wow, you've all ticked the boxes.
Then through this reinforcement and sensitization, these symptoms become absolutely real. Headaches, fatigue. They become debilitating kind of symptoms.
Interesting. Would you say, do you dare agree? COVID, when COVID came out and like it was a DVD release when COVID came out, and it was, you've got, I don't know, can't even remember what the blooming symptoms were. You've got like sore throat, whatever. And then they started adding more and more symptoms, and now it causes upset tummies. Talking of upset tummies, shout out to Bestie Ben, who's currently laid up at home, not feeling very well. It's not a radio. I'm told that I've got a good voice for radio, a good face for radio. I can't quite remember. So we'll do it in the radio voice. Shout out to Ben. Here's a bit of Blink 182 to cheer you up. Carry on. Enjoy the toilet. Carry on. Let's go on. I can't play Blink 182. 182. It's outside the licensing for music. Where were we? So we have COVID, and they had all these extra symptoms. Toilets, Ben, going on, and so it's sort of like you don't have to answer it. Just
I think you can answer it. I think this is, these phenomena are present in all of us. And I think in something like COVID, when it's inevitable that these things will happen, you create this novel situation, a lot of fear and uncertainty, and you tell people what to look out for. I was, trying to smell things out of my fridge and work out like
drinking
whether
the
I
wine,
could smell or not.
Have I lost my taste?
Yeah.
No, the whiskey tastes fine.
I was doing all sorts of that stuff, so for sure. And I think with long COVID as well, it's clearly like these post-viral syndromes exist, and they're absolutely debilitating. But I think there's probably a spectrum and a crossover, because there has to be. You've created the ideal scenario for a psychogenic illness. You make people feel afraid. You tell them what symptoms to look out for. The symptoms are quite sort of non-specific and generalized. It has, it's just what a human phenomenon that will occur. It's difficult to know how to. It's very difficult to know how to navigate, because, I guess the reflex response in the public domain to saying something psychogenic is like that I'm making it up. For example. When we know that's not what it means. But yes, this is where Do
you deal with people with long COVID?
Not particularly. I haven't. Although it is, I think there is. I think it's kind of like you take a pragmatic view. That's where you're dealing with this uncertainty. You're helping the patient tolerate uncertainty. Like, we don't know what's going on. You've tried all these treatments and nothing's worked. Why don't we try like some talking therapy? We can't say it'll work for sure, but it's a non-invasive treatment. So that's kind of sometimes one of the angles that.
Talking therapy really works, though, doesn't it? Like, I suppose it depends on what. So obviously, like, CBT's been a big go-to for many, many years. ACT, I was looking at last year, which, I get like PubMed alerts coming in. And that's, I find that fascinating how much of an impact that makes with people. But then it's sort of like how much of it is just literally sort of that talking side and building that relationship and, education. So there was one of the, I'm sure Lorimer Moseley was involved. He's like been mentioned. He's like the star of the show. But I'm sure he did one where I'm sure it was the back pain one who was involved. Resolve, was it? But they did a really good pain education sort of thing around lower back pain. I'm sure it was. And then they had a really good sham treatment. But it's sort of like one of those. If you're doing like a sort of like a talking therapy sort of thing, and you're having that therapeutic relationship, and that treatment, that therapy, whatever it is, and there's a talking element with a clinician to patient. Even in a placebo, there's that element. There's potentially that transfer of sort of education of not necessarily explicitly, but it's unless you're monitoring every sort of interaction between the people providing the treatment and the research, I think it'd be difficult to monitor.
It is very hard, and I know that in psychedelics research, that's something that has been difficult because it involves it's tended to involve a combination of psychotherapy and like a medical, medicine, or the psilocybin or whatever. And in psychotherapy, in any form of therapy, I think any study that has consistently found that the quality of the relationship is the thing that makes the difference, rather than the type of therapy, basically. Yeah. So I think in research that's an issue, because you can't standardize the quality of a relationship, of how people are going to feel and get on in response to other people. So that creates a real difficulty.
And humans are all individuals, so we all connect differently. So, like, if you were providing me with some sort of therapeutic, you probably have, but then you were doing it with somebody else, that's going to be different. And then, obviously you got intra-related liability. Yeah, I do know it. So it's tricky. And like massage, so a lot of massage treatments and stuff, and they do a lot of studies with massage. But one of the problems is like, as a massage therapist, you alter your technique depending on the patient that in front of you. So, if they find pressure too hard, you go lighter. If you find a particular not that area, you might start focusing on it more or applying pressure differently. And so it's like, well, no two bodies are the same. No two massages are the same. So it's like, well, how can you realistically claim? So it's quite difficult, because like RCTs are quite a tricky one for anything sort of therapy based.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to have to wrap up. We've been talking for ages.
Have we?
We have been talking for ages. Has it flown?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, I love talking.
I love talking. I love hearing the sound of my voice as well. So it's like on here, and you can hear it with the headphones, and it's like, oh, it's me. So finishing off, do you have socials you want to share? And I'll pop them in the list.
I don't actually at the moment. I'm kind of trying to go a bit offline in life. But trying to work out how to keep the good bits and get rid of the bad bits. So it's a bit of a journey that I'm on, so I've not quite worked it out yet. But so not currently. Okay.
So if anyone wants to find Harvey, just follow the bats and the bat babies.
Yeah.
You don't know, I know. And and it's been great having you on. Hopefully we'll get you back in and get now into the swing of things on chatting about random stuff. Yeah. And so thank you very much. Yeah. I will see you all on the next one. I'm trying to think who my next guests are. I believe I'm actually got I've got Mark and Ed coming in, and we're going to be discussing the sports injury rehabilitation degree here at Wrexham University, and discovering and physiotherapy. So Ed's on physio, so we're going to be sort of comparing the two courses. Going to launch into a fight now. It's all going to be very amicable and professional and grown up. So thank you very much. Take care, enjoy your day, and crack on.